there are two Hockey Hall of Famers, icons for the franchise that they're working for, that are in the front office now that are giving their legacy a bit of a hit here. I don't want to say ruining their legacy, but are damaging it quite a bit. And those two guys are Cam Neely with the Boston Bruins and Steve Yzerman of the Detroit Red Wings. Two of my absolute favorite players of all time, even though they had their primes in the case of Neely, his whole career before I was born. Like, genuinely love Cam Neely, man. Honored to have the same name. Love watching his highlights and everything. And Steve Yzerman, the class and the dynasty that he led. Literally two of my probably top 5 favorite NHL players of all time. And yet they're both struggling in their front offices right now. I mean, with Neely, the absolute embarrassment of the press conference that we went over yesterday, where he's just antagonizing the media and kind of through that antagonizing the fans. It's been a terrible look. And certainly in Detroit, the Yzer plan is not panning out so far. And they're all kinds of frustrated. The fans, the media, the captain of that team. It is crazy how much symmetry there is here of just guys who had untouchable legacies with their organizations and took a chance, and it's not going well right now. In the case of Cam Neely, look, he does have his name on the Stanley Cup as an executive. He was the president in 2011. He was a big part of kind of getting that thing back. He was a big voice in hiring Pete Chiarelli, who built the 2011 team, and there was some in some way they were built in his image, Cam Neely's image, and it led them to a Stanley Cup. And so that needs to be addressed. But right now, things are going in the wrong direction, and it's partially Cam Neely's fault, and he is now being an antagonist to the Boston sports media, who in this press conference were really talking for the fans. Lest we forget this cut when Kevin Paul DuPont asked about the lack of draft success that they've had under Don Sweeney's tenure in really the last decade.
Neither of them have really been up to expectations, in my opinion.
So can you just elaborate on that, Kevin?
The drafting?
Yeah.
Well,
where we've picked and who we've picked and how it's turned out.
It's just nuts, man, that we have to give context. We have to explain to him why the Bruins suck at drafting. We need to give examples of that. Cam, bro, you're not fooling anybody. You're not even fooling the jock sniffers, man. Everybody knows that this team has sucked at drafting and development the last 10 years. And immediately starts going back to the 2015 draft 10 years ago and like justifying why it was so bad. It's like, brother, you had 3 straight picks in the top 15 and you got one serviceable NHL player out of that. And you're going to try to justify that 10 years later? In and of itself, that's really brain dead and stupid. But the reasoning is even worse. He says, oh, well, Don Sweeney, he had just been hired as the GM a month before. Okay, that's a little misleading. It's not lying, but it's misleading. He wasn't hired. He was promoted. He was made GM from his previous role as assistant general manager. So you mean to tell me that Don Sweeney had no idea what they were looking at for their first round pick? And then he makes 2 trades to get inside the top 15 and get 3 picks right beside each other? But he didn't know. Was he not part of this process? He was the assistant general manager. It's not like you brought this guy in from the outside. It's not like Harry Sinden painting houses before he had to put together the Summit Series team for Canada in 72. The guy was part of the process. And then why would he make 2 more trades to get into 2 more picks inside the top 15 if he just didn't know where they were going to go? If he didn't know what they were looking for, if they didn't have a goddamn plan. That is embarrassing right there from Cam Neely, man. Like the ultimate hockey guy. And brought up this point yesterday. Mike from Woburn, classic analyst on this situation, had a great point on Twitter of the Jacobs family brought in Cam Neely 20 years ago to be the president because Cam Neely's the consummate Bruin. He's the ultimate Bruin, right? The absolute fan favorite, the definition of a power forward. Like, there was nothing Cam Neely could do to damage his reputation with Bruins fans. And it was almost like a scapegoat. Like, the Jacobs family were sick of hearing the fans bitching because they hadn't been relevant in 15 years to that point. And they wanted to bring in Cam, not even necessarily because they believed in him, but because it could take some weight off them. And it worked out for a while, right? He built the Stanley Cup team. He was part of that for sure. And again, his reputation, they'll never lower the number 8 from the rafters or anything. But this takes a hit, man. Bruins fans are sick of this shit. He promoted his buddy, who is also a prick in these press conferences, because how dare anybody ask them for some sort of accountability, especially minutes after their boss, Charlie Jacobs, says the accountability has never been higher. It's a really bad look. It's a really bad look for Cam Neely and this front office. And I've had this discussion with Bruins fans of like people wearing Cam Neely jerseys at games and being like, yeah, I know. I just hate what he's doing now. You should never have to justify wearing a Cam Neely jersey to a Bruins game, ever. He's one of the greatest Bruins of all time and an absolute badass on the ice. Just a dumbass in the front office at this point because they're not moving on. And they're just going to keep letting this happen. And it's the reporter's fault. It's everybody else's fucking fault. It's the coach's fault. It's the fans' fault for being negative when they suck. It's the media's fault for asking questions about why they suck at a press conference, an annual press conference, where the whole point of it is to explain why you suck or why you don't suck. And even afterwards, at the end of it, like Neely's gesturing towards Kevin Paul DuPont, like, hey, Kevin, come here. Calling him into the principal's office. Like, where do you fucking get off, man? Like, this is the job. How do you not know this is the job? You expect us to just be like, oh, Cam, remember when you nailed Stefan Richer in 1988? That's what you expect us to talk about after you guys finished in the basement of the Eastern Conference? Oh, yeah, I really think that you picked Charlie McAvoy. That was so great. That's the one fucking good draft pick you've had in 10 years. Oh, yeah, you know what? That's a good point, Cam. Remember when you reached on Zach Senyshyn when all these all-stars were still available? Yeah, that's great, man. That's fantastic. I much prefer to have Zach Senyshyn than Matthew Barzal. I think that worked out swimmingly for the Bruins. The guy's not even, everyone in the world can see that the Bruins are not good at drafting and developing, and the only ones that won't admit it are the GM, the president, and the team owner. They're the only ones that won't admit it. Zach Senyshyn would admit it. Jake DeBrusk would admit it. All these guys would, except for these guys, because they're never wrong. They're never wrong. God forbid. It's such a joke, man. And now I watch the Stanley Cup playoffs and I see all these goal scorers, late first round picks. And I'm like, oh man, how does that happen? How can you draft an impact player in the first round? Cam Neely says you can't if you're not picking inside the top 10, excuse me. Yeah, we've missed on a couple. You've missed on all but one in Don Sweeney's tenure, and that's Charlie McAvoy. That's it. That's it. And as pissed as we are in Boston, they're just as pissed with their franchise icon, Steve Yzerman in Detroit. The Yzer plan, not exactly working. And in some ways, it's a lot worse than the situation in Boston because, A, obviously they haven't made the playoffs in, 9 years now. That's the big one. But B, they got a coup by bringing in Steve Yzerman. They had no business bringing in Steve Yzerman. And in fact, any other team that wasn't the Detroit Red Wings, the team that he played his entire career for and won 3 Stanley Cups with, probably wouldn't have been able to get Steve Yzerman from Tampa because he had already laid the foundation for what became a back-to-back Stanley Cup championship team. He was the guy making those draft picks, finding diamonds in the rough, Braden Point in whatever, the 3rd or 4th round. finding Andrei Vasilevsky, Victor Hedman. Like these guys, these were all Yzerman picks. So he doesn't get the Stanley Cup rings out of it because he was already in Detroit by 2019. But make no mistake about it, he laid the foundation for that team. And they were already a success story. 2011, they made the conference final. 2015, they made the Stanley Cup final. And all the seeds were still there from him outside of, Stamkos. The rest were Steve Yzerman guys. And he goes to Detroit, and here it comes, man. The prodigal son coming home, the legendary captain, one of my favorite players as I wear the jersey of all time. He comes in, and here we are, 6 years later. They're still not in the postseason. He's brought in some cornerstone pieces, right? Mo Seider. I think Larkin had already been there for a year. Made sure they had some of those guys. Lucas Raymond brings in. And you look at that roster with the Red Wings, and you're like, how is this team not in the playoffs? Do they look like a President's Trophy winner? No. But you're like, that looks like a playoff team. This roster is just as talented as Ottawa. Just as more talented probably than St. Louis, who's the hottest team in hockey the last 2 months of the year, and they snuck into the playoffs. Pretty close to what Minnesota's rolling out. Minnesota's got one line, man, and some veteran depth guys. That's it. And so you're looking at that, you're saying, how is this Yzer plan not working? And we're not the only ones thinking that, because here's where it gets really bad for Stevie Y. It's not just the Detroit Red Wings fans. It's not even the Detroit media necessarily that are the only ones calling him out. Because in the we suck end of the year press conference, his captain, Dylan Larkin, is up there saying, yeah, we didn't make any moves at the deadline. I think that really rattled the room. And calling out his general manager in front of everybody. 6 years into this thing, they still haven't made the playoffs. They have some of the same drafting woes that the Bruins have with Cam Neely. They had two top 15 picks in 2021. Let me make sure I'm getting this right here. Yeah, 2 in the top 15. Simon Edvinsson was picked 6th overall, and Sebastian Casa, who has played one game. Edvinsson's been okay the last 2 seasons on the blue line. But that was 2021, and Mackie Samoskevich and Wyatt Johnston were both picked after those guys. So was Fabian Lysell, by the way. And both of their 23 first-round draft picks have not appeared in an NHL game yet, which, it's still early, but come on. But you look at the team they had this year, man, and Lucas Raymond has a good season. DeBrincat comes on towards the end of the season. He had a bad first half. Seider is still great. Larkin is still pretty great. Patrick Kane, a little underwhelming, but still gave you 20-plus goals. And you're not making the playoffs, man. How do you look at Steve Yzerman's legacy now? Again, you're never taking 19 out of the rafters or anything. You're not forgetting the Stanley Cup championships. But this is where it becomes a dangerous game when you go in and kind of put your legacy on the line, the way Cam Neely has done, the way Steve Yzerman has done. Rod Brind'Amour in Carolina, pretty good. He took a huge risk becoming the head coach, and now he's, I think, the most successful coach in their history. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes you get this. Cam Neely and Steve Yzerman pissing on their own legacies because they have not been able to bring their franchises where they need to be as front office people. Anyway, let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. Only about 10% of you who are actually watching are subscribed. We're bringing you nothing but Boston sports content 5 days a week, live on YouTube, and then wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, I'm your host, Cam Stewart. Zach Burke keeps us on the air. Check out the other videos going out around the channel, talking Bruins and talking everything that's going on in the world of Boston sports.